The following compilation features unsettling and spine-chilling tales sourced from Reddit's horror communities. Reader discretion is strongly advised. These narratives may contain graphic descriptions, psychological distress, and themes that could unsettle sensitive individuals. Proceed with caution, as immersion into these eerie stories may provoke fear, unease, and sleep disturbances. Enter this realm of Reddit's creepy horror stories at your own risk, as the line between reality and the macabre may blur within these chilling narratives. I don't remember much of the house fire that killed both my parents. I lived on the first floor, but the grey smoke had grown so thick that I stumbled blindly for what felt like hours before finding a door. My throat felt like sandpaper, and my eyes constantly streamed tears of irritation and pain. Strips of burned and mutilated flesh hung from my poor hands, though I knew it would heal rapidly. Within a few hours, a firefighter appeared like a ghostly silhouette before me. I remember the flashing lights of police and fire trucks and the faraway echo of deep voices. From the direction of the house, I remember the dying screams of my parents as they burned alive. My childish imagination could never have predicted what would come next. Behind the flurry of ambulances, fire trucks and cop cars, I saw a single black sedan with tinted windows. Compared to the bright colors and strobing lights of the emergency vehicles, it looked like little more than a shadow. The windshield, too, looked dark and opaque, nearly impossible to see through. I sat in the back of an ambulance. The EMTs had already cleared me, saying I only had a few scrapes and some mild smoke inhalation and eye irritation, but that I didn't require urgent care or hospitalization. Abruptly, the doors of the black sedan flew open. Two men in black suits stepped out, wearing sunglasses even in the middle of the night. I stared, open-mouthed, as they swerved their way through the jumble of emergency responders and vehicles. They came straight at me, unsmiling and grave. Their faces looked extremely pale, almost vampiric in a way. "Hey there, Ghostin." Ghostin. Quite a unique name, the one on the right said calmly, stretching my name out as he dropped down on one knee. His sunglasses looked like mirrors, but they reflected the world darkly. "Hi," I whispered in a tiny voice. "Who are you?" "We're here to bring you to a good home," he responded in a voice as soothing as balm on a wound. He put a hand on my shoulder, trying to be comforting, but through the thin fabric of my t-shirt, I could feel his skin burning as if with an inner fever. I tried to draw back, but his grip tightened, the fingers digging into the thin bones. "Where's Mom and Dad?" I asked. "Why haven't they come out?" He just shook his head. "We'll explain everything on the way, son," he said. Rising to his feet, he gently patted me on the shoulder a few times for good measure. No one else paid us any attention. With the two strange men beside me, we started off toward their sedan. "My name is Keller," the leader of the two men said as he slid smoothly into the driver's seat. He motioned at the silent one next to him. "This is Vlad." "Where are we going?" I asked. He turned in his seat, jerking his head to face me. The veins on his forehead and neck seemed to pound in time with his heart. "You sure do ask a lot of fucking questions, kid," Keller hissed. His teeth gritted as his lips flew into a snarl. Taken aback, I sat as silent as a statue as he started the car and slowly pulled away from the jumble of emergency vehicles. We traveled in silence for hours, down winding roads and past dark forests. I remember we eventually came to a small airfield in the middle of scattered cornfields. A man with a black rifle stood at the front gate, looking bored and tired. Keller showed him a silver badge in a black leather case, and the gate started to roll to the side. Keller pulled into a dark corner of the airfield. Together, the two agents quickly got out, slamming their doors closed. I had tried the handle a couple times along the trip, hoping I could jump out when the car slowed or stopped, but it was locked from the outside somehow. Now I frantically grabbed it again, shaking the door with as much force as my small body could muster. I only saw the grinning, pale face of Vlad outside. A key jiggled outside, and both doors flew open. In Vlad's hand, I saw a needle filled with clear fluid. They held me down as he injected it in my neck. I felt sick and weak as black waves clouded my vision. I fell into a dreamless sleep. By the time I woke up, things around me had changed drastically. I was handcuffed and thrown into the back of an SUV with a pounding migraine. I looked up front, seeing Keller and Vlad still in the front seats. But now, the windows outside showed jagged mountain peaks covered in thick drifts of snow. The night outside looked freezing cold. Endless forests disappeared into the shadows off in the distance. I could feel the car rapidly accelerating uphill as hail peppered the windshield and roof. Vlad glanced in the rearview mirror. His eyes reminded me of those of a Siberian husky, ice-cold and predatory. "Ah, you're awake? That's good," Vlad hissed in a thick Eastern European accent. "We'll be there soon, Ghostin. There are few things you should probably know before we get there. Escape is impossible. Anyone who tries gets shot by the snipers. Some who lose hope might take it as the easy way out. Perhaps those are the smart ones. When you get there, you and the other newcomers will take a test. Those of you who fail will be euthanized. Do you know what euthanasia is?" "Ghostin," I nodded. "Every month, the bottom 10% of the class will be taken out. At the end of 9 months, those left alive will be offered jobs with the CIA and the military. All the kids there are freaks, just like you. They don't all heal burnt, blackened skin in a few hours. Though," Vlad continued, "that is impressive." I felt a cold shudder run down my spine as I realized these men knew far more about me than seemed possible. "What else can you do, kid?" "Nothing," I muttered. My hands weren't that badly hurt. "I think you're exaggerating." My voice felt weak and small. "Uh-huh," Keller said sarcastically. "Oh, look at that. What a sight." "Huh?" I remember that moment like a screenshot to this day. I gazed open-mouthed in horror up the steep mountain slope. Dark patches of evergreens surrounded the small, snow-covered road on both sides. Their boughs reached out toward the SUV, their overgrown needles scraping the sides with a faint screech. I could smell the overwhelming presence of pine coming in through the vents. Above us loomed something like a massive high school, surrounded by rolls of razor wire and multiple layers of tall, electrified fences. A dozen jet-black sniper towers were placed equidistant around the perimeter of the property. The enormous brick building at the center looked like it had no windows at all. Sheer concrete walls rose to a flat roof a few stories high. Large, industrial-sized smokestacks scattered over the top constantly belched black smoke into the crisp Alaskan air. Behind it, dozens of snow-capped mountains stretched off towards the horizon. We pulled up to the gate. Spotlights converged on the SUV from all directions. A guard dressed in all black stood there with a large rifle strapped to his chest. On his face, he wore a silver mask. It had long, slitted eyes and metal lips tightly pressed together in a grimace. My first thought was of the man in the iron mask. 2 more guards stood in a nearby guardhouse wearing identical masks. Though they varied in height and build, Keller rolled down the window. The guard in charge spoke in an electronically distorted voice. It sounded inhumanly deep, with a subtle hiss of static writhing under his words. "What is your business?" the guard hissed. "We're dropping off another subject for the tests," Keller said calmly, showing his silver badge. "The Department for the Cleansing of Anomalies. We have another shipment coming in by train from the capital," the guard said, his mask revealing and distorted voice revealing nothing of what lay hidden under the surface. "The cleaners are unloading the train now. You can drop the boy off over there. He needs to get an identification number." I didn't like the sound of any of this. Most of all, I felt unnerved by the way they talked about me, as if I were a sack of meat getting delivered to a butcher shop. The SUV slowly pulled off from the front gate, following the freshly plowed road that wound its way around the exterior of the strange, prison-like school. I could hear faraway screams, a combination of many dissonant voices that rose and swelled into a hellish cacophony. I saw a platform of bare, grey concrete swarming with hundreds of kids, most of them looking like they were in the range of 9 to 13. More armed soldiers wearing the same silver masks screamed orders. Some held black German shepherds on long chains that snarled and snapped at the kids, pulling against their restraints with wolfish ferocity.
"We're here!"
Keller exclaimed excitedly, pulling up next to the concrete platform. They pulled me out, taking off my handcuffs and shoving me into the surging crowd. The men in the silver masks pushed us forward relentlessly towards the building. Males to the right, females to the left, one of the guards said in an electronically amplified voice, repeating it over and over. More guards had black truncheons, which they used to beat kids who they thought moved too slow or, sometimes, for no reason at all. I looked down the line of people, wondering where it led. Hundreds of boys disappeared into a dark hallway, while the line of girls veered off to the other side of the platform, where another similarly black threshold waited to swallow them up. "Keep moving forward," another guard said, smashing his truncheon down over and over on the backs of boys ahead of me. I heard bones cracking and panicked screams. People tried to run past the sadistic guards of this hellish place, but they timed their shots with practiced ease. I saw quite a few kids get bit by the dogs as well. Drops of fresh blood stained the ground leading forward, mixing with darker, older stains eaten into the pavement. I shivered uncontrollably in the freezing Alaskan winter, wondering if I had somehow ended up in hell. Maybe I had died in the fire along with my parents, and this was eternity. I tried to slink into the center of the crowd, letting the boys on both sides of me take the brunt of the blows. Though a few glancing strikes still hit me, I felt immensely grateful when we moved into the black hallway, which at least had some heat. Bizarre slogans in gold paint lined both sides of the wall. "Welcome to Stonehall, the School of Eyes," one read. "A hurricane of souls spirals out of the chimneys, rejuvenating the planet," read another. It was almost as if a schizophrenic in a psychotic state had written their thoughts down, though they seemed to connect in any eerie way I couldn't yet understand. Next to me stood a small boy with jet black hair and a nose that looked like it had been broken and badly set. Unlike the others, he wasn't screaming or upset. He looked calm. He glanced over at me, meeting my eyes. "Hello," he said over the wailing and cries of the confused, hurt kids. "How are you?" I laughed at that. "Not very good. To tell you the truth," I answered. "I think we might die tonight." The boy shook his head once, the serenity never leaving his eyes. "No, not you and not me," he said simply. "Others, yes, but people die here all the time. After all, like the sign said, a hurricane of souls spirals out." "How do you know we won't die?" I asked. Confused, he leaned close to me. There was an odd smell around the boy, almost like ozone with a note of panicked sweat. Yet his expression reflected no perturbation in his mind. "I can see the future. Sometimes," he whispered, looking around to make sure no one was listening, "just in small doses, and it's not always right. It's like, imagine if reality was a beehive, filled with millions of cells rising above you. Those are all the possible worlds. But some paths are straighter heading upwards, and these are the more likely realities. Other paths would have to swerve and curve in insane ways, and these realities almost never come true." "Well, I sure hope you're right," I said, "because today is not a good day to die." I found out that the boy's name was Dean. I stayed close by his side as all of the boys were herded, one by one, into a room. After waiting for nearly half an hour, it was my turn. A guard in a silver mask took my arm and put it on top of some sort of machine that reminded me of an X-ray. A metal clamp closed around my wrist and elbow. Two other guards watched, armed with black rifles. Suddenly, red lasers shot out, sizzling into my skin. I screamed, trying to pull away, but seconds later, it was over. I looked down at my arm, seeing a number tattooed there in black copperplate, A2101. After that, we were led into a large auditorium with hundreds of velvet-lined seats facing a stage. A man in a black robe wearing the same iron mask as all the other guards stood there waiting, not moving in the slightest. For a moment, I thought it might be a mannequin. Dean stood behind me in line. "Find seats," the guards screamed in their amplified voices. People scrambled to the nearest open seat. Dean and I found 2 seats near the front, only a stone's throw away from the still figure on the stage, looming over the crowd like the angel of death. On the right arm of each seat, there was a tablet. The screen stayed dark for now, but once the hundreds of boys had taken their seats, all of them in the room turned on at once. "You know why you're here in Stonehall?" the black-robed man on the stage said, taking a long step towards the students. "Each of you are different, capable of great things. In this school, we will weed out the weak and feeble. Only the strongest and smartest will survive. The first round of elimination will take place by test. Enter your identification number at the top of the screen. The test will begin in 10 seconds. The questions that came up on the screen seemed bizarre and nonsensical some of the time. The first strange one had to do with tarot. It read, "In front of you, you see the Fool, the Hanged Man and the Devil. What card comes next?" In a flash, I somehow knew what they wanted me to say. "The Death card." I typed on the small touchscreen keyboard. The questions varied wildly. Some topics focused on astral projection or out-of-body experiences, while others asked about ancient types of torture. Strange wildcards continuously came up, non-sequiturs like the tarot question. I still remember another bizarre one. If the National Socialists had won World War II, in what year would Adolf Hitler have died? It asked. I thought about what Dean had said, how he could see different realities above him like the cells of an eternal beehive. I wrote down 1949, and the test was over. The screens all went black simultaneously. Spotlights overhead came on, shining down on us from all directions. The white glare blinded me temporarily. On the stage, I could just barely see the silhouette of the robed man. He raised his hand, his pointer finger extended upwards, reminding me of the ISIS salute. "The tests are being scored now," he rasped. "Please stay in your seats." I nervously looked around, seeing the other students sweating heavily. The doors at the back of the auditorium flew open. Dozens of guards with rifles walked in, their masks gleaming under the harsh fluorescent light. In pairs, they walked over to some of the boys, pulling their arms out and checking the tattooed numbers. They passed by me and Dean, but the boy on the other side of me had failed. Sweating heavily, I saw him stumble to his feet as the black-gloved hands of the guards forced him up. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice weak and uncertain. "Where are you taking me?" "Shut the fuck up," a guard hissed, pushing him forward onto the steps. The boy went sprawling, smashing his face into the hard steps with a sickening thud. A moment later, he raised his swollen head. Streams of blood flowed from his nose. He spit up frothy blood and a piece of a tooth. After a few minutes, they had lined up a few dozen of the boys out of the few hundred people in the class. At gunpoint, they marched them out and into the hall. "The rest of you will be shown to your rooms," the black-robed man at the front of the hall said. "Every month, you will have a test, though not all will be based on knowledge. Some tests may be based on your skills and abilities. You will be honed over the months, strengthened and shown amazing sights." We were led out into the hallway. It split off into 4 corridors, and off in the distance, I saw it split off again. The halls had been decorated somewhat like a traditional school, with tiled floors and brick walls. Fluorescent lights hung overhead, casting the pale, terrified faces below in a white glare. Stairs going up 6 or 7 levels opened up intermittently. They sectioned us off in groups of a dozen, sending us into rooms with cold steel bunk beds covered in thin mattresses. I was thankful to see Dean in my group. I laid down immediately, feeling bone-tired and weak from all that happened and the long distances I had traveled. I heard Dean weeping in the bunk below me. And then, far below us, the screaming started. At first, it came through muffled. I saw air vents in the room, square grills at the corners. The sound seemed to come from them. The wailing intensified, the notes of agony and terror growing stronger. "What is that?" I whispered, not wanting to know the answer. I had a sick feeling in my stomach. My heart was racing. "You can't see it?" Dean asked. "I can. They get locked in concrete rooms. Then the vents start whirring, and the poison comes through. They see their nails turning blue as they pile up into pyramids of bodies, coughing up blood from screaming so loud and so long. Can't you see it? No, I can't, I said. After about 15 or 20 minutes, the intense, agonized wailing began quieting down. One by one, the voices died out like stars winking out at the end of the universe. I fell asleep sometime in the pitch-black night. I dreamed of pyramids of naked corpses with dilated pupils and blue lips. Men in hazmat suits came in, but when they turned to look at me, I realized their suits were fused to their skin. Their plastic masks melted to their blood red, grinning skulls. I woke up screaming as something like a tornado siren rang out above me. Bright lights turned on overhead, humming with an incessant tinking sound. I thrashed in my bed, falling off the side of the bunk and landing on the floor. The other boys looked at me like I was insane. Dean got out of bed and helped me stand up. We were marched single file back down the hallway. Classrooms opened up on both sides of us, filled with a mixture of girls and boys. A silent guard with a silver mask pointed us toward a classroom on the right, where a dozen girls sat at tables, their eyes looking tired and haunted. A man stood at the front of the class with strange, blood-red irises. He had a shaved head and a reddish hue to his skin, as if he were at risk of exploding from hypertension at any moment. "Sit down," he yelled. "Sit down. We don't have much time here." I quickly found a seat at a table with 3 other boys. On the chalkboard, the man had written, in large, spiky letters, Pyroki North East SIS. "My name is Mr. Antimony, and I'm here to teach you little shits about pyrokinesis," he hissed, walking in circles with a manic energy. "Most of you will fail. The art of harnessing the deathless self within the heart and bringing heat from it is a rare one. It has been practiced by Buddhist monks and practitioners of Advaita Vedanta for millennia, along with the other higher arts like telekinesis, mind reading, and astral projection. A few of you may be worthy enough to realize the source of this power. In the drawers in front of each of you, you will find a variety of objects: cotton balls, rubbing alcohol, paper, and a book titled The Art of Living Fire, written by the ancient seer Hermes Trismegistus. In the first class of this bizarre place, we were taught how to hit objects with our hands until they exploded into flames. The 2 other boys at our table, Kim, a young Asian kid with magnified glasses, and Tommy, a little malnourished-looking kid, instantly proved to be adept at the lessons. I hadn't succeeded in lighting even the smallest cotton ball when something went horribly wrong in a flash. Kim had succeeded in igniting a Bible on fire when a ball of flames shot out of his hands, causing the bottle of alcohol to erupt. It melted in an instant, dripping a blue inferno over the table. It soaked into Kim's shirt and pants, and the red flames that emanated from his hands exploded. He screamed, running in circles as his skin blackened and dripped. I saw his eyes melting out of his head. He fell to the floor, and someone grabbed a jacket and tried to smother the flames, but it simply ignited. The student dropped the jacket, backing away from the screaming, writhing body on the floor. During the next few weeks, we continued to learn at the nightmarish classes of Stonehall. Regular casualties occurred, and deaths frequently happened during accidents. Yet these deaths did not go towards the quota that would be enforced in another week. Another 10% of the class would die, and this time, they said the tests would include practical demonstrations of powers that would be ruled by a team of judges. "We need to get out of here," Dean whispered one night. Tommy lay at the next bunk over, his small face looking pinched and mousy in the dark. "They're going to start the executions again soon," he said. "The path to the concrete rooms down below." "The path to the gas chambers," Dean agreed. "We need to find a way to break out and tell the world about this place." All of us had grown exponentially in the last few weeks, our latent abilities coming to fruition under the constant watchful eyes of the teachers. "Why don't you use your precognitive abilities to see a way out?" I asked Dean. "There has to be weak spots. Maybe we can kill the guards and take their suits. If we had the masks on." "We're too small," Tommy said. I shook my head. "You're too small," I said. "Dean and I might be able to pass." "Not all the guards are tall," After all, what if the students rebelled? Tommy asked. Maybe we could ask around. See if other kids want to fight back and try to escape. If all of us attack them at once. They have precognitive abilities, too, Dean said. They're going to see the most likely paths, just like I can, at least the ones at the top, and a few of the teachers. So it comes down to my plan. I think, I said, and we don't know who we can trust. The three of us could probably kill and overpower a guard. What do you think? They killed my parents and kidnapped me. Tommy spat with venom. I would love to see some of these fuckers dead. I hope it doesn't come to that, but I think it might, Dean said, and then everything went quiet. On the day before the scheduled test, Tommy came running up to me and Dean after the class on assassination techniques had finished. His scarecrow-thin face shone with a wide grin. I had never seen him so excited. I think I found a way out, he said. He looked around furtively, making sure no one else stood close enough to hear. Do you guys remember the day you came in here? I nodded. How could I forget? I got dropped off by 2 agents, I said. They claimed they were from some non-existent government agency called the Cleaners. I came on the cattle cars, Tommy said, frowning at the memory. Well, they drop off more kids out there every day. They need constant fresh meat for the tests. After all, there are guards all over the place, and cars out there. We need to find a weak spot in the guards' defense, I said, where we can overpower a couple of them and kill them and steal their uniforms. After that, you think we could just walk out of here? The medical ward usually isn't heavily guarded, Dean said. We need to do it tonight. Though, this is the last chance. We made it sound so easy. But in reality, I knew it would be an almost impossible task. The rest of the day passed by in a blur. Before I knew it, the classes had finished, and we were being led back to the chambers. We waited in the darkness, whispering so the other boys wouldn't hear our plans. When 3 a.m. rolled around, Dean indicated it was time to go. The hallways outside are empty, he whispered. We need to move now, as quickly and quietly as we can. I saw his pupils constricting and expanding rapidly, as they always did when he tried to tap into the multiverse of possibilities. I wondered what it looked like, staring up into the beehive of realities. Despite his attempts to help me learn some precog abilities, I had failed in every attempt so far. Whether day or night, the hallways always looked the same, windowless, with every inch of them illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights overhead.
Dean leads us successfully down turn after turn.
I heard the guard's steps missing us by mere seconds, afraid to even breathe too loud. We made our way towards the medical ward. Are you guys ready? Dean whispered. Using his abilities seemed to take a toll on him. His face looked pale and sweaty, his dilated pupils gleaming manically. We need to fight. There are 2 guards up ahead. Fuck, Tommy whispered back. I can't believe we're doing this. They're going to murder us if we don't. Maybe, I said. We have to kill them first. Hey, stop right there, a guard exclaimed abruptly. Coming around the corner, he had an automatic rifle slung around his shoulder. I froze like a deer in the headlights, staring dumbly at the guard. Luckily, Tommy went into action immediately, running at the guard before he could aim his gun. Tommy raised his small hands, causing a swirling vortex of flame to erupt from his hands. With lightning-fast reflexes, the guard grabbed his rifle as Tommy's hands wrapped around his bare throat. There was a flash as the rifle fired. At the same moment, the skin on the guard's neck started to drip and blacken. There was an echoing of pained screams as my ears rang. Another guard came around the corner seconds later, aiming his rifle at Dean's head. Dean shot a flash of blue lightning from the tips of his fingers, using his telekinetic powers to send the rifle flying upwards. The bullet smashed harmlessly into the ceiling, causing dust and debris to rain down on our heads. Tommy fell on the guard's body, a torrent of blood pumping from the massive hole in his chest. I ran at the second guard, a flash of blue light sparking from my fingertips and sending him sprawling backwards. He grabbed his rifle, shooting blindly in the direction of me and Dean. I heard bullets whizzing past my head, missing my brain by inches. I'm hit, Dean screamed. I looked back, seeing a ragged hole eaten into his right shoulder. Blood spurted from the wound in time with his heartbeat. Tommy had stopped moving as he lay on the writhing body of the other guard. The flames spread down his body. He kicked and clenched with all of his strength, looking like a poisoned hornet twisting on the floor. I knew I was alone now, focusing on the spinning vortex of energy within my heart. I tried to bring out the fire I had never succeeded in creating before. The guard lay stunned for a moment, but I knew he would rapidly recover. I leapt forward, putting my hands around his throat. I felt something freezing cold running through my blood, but when it emerged from my skin, it grew burning hot. An acrid smell like ounceone and burning metal surrounded me, pouring off my feverish skin. The guard screamed as his throat melted. His gurgling grew low and distorted. I felt his windpipe collapsing under the heat and assault. Breathing heavily, I looked around, expecting to see a platoon of guards running in. Someone must have heard all the gunshots and screaming. Dean's eyes had started to roll up in his head by this point. I crawled over to him, slapping his face. "Stay with me, man," I whispered. Rapidly, his lips took on a bluish cast. His paleness grew vampiric. His skin chalk white. I knew it was useless. I got up, feeling dissociated and unreal. I looked around, seeing an empty, dark room down the hall. It was one of the rooms for the medical ward, filled with unoccupied beds and equipment. With a rush of adrenaline, I leaned down, dragging the body of the guard I had killed over to the room. At first, his body seemed too heavy, impossibly heavy, but my telekinetic powers came rushing out. I felt drained from using my powers so much, and I hoped that soon I could rest. I rapidly stripped the guard of his military gear and silver mask. Underneath, I saw a young man, probably in his early 20s. He had a soft, childlike face. He seemed on the border of life and death as his gurgling breaths came slower and shallower. I wondered how such cruelty could hide behind such a mundane exterior. It took me a few minutes to change, breathing heavily in the dark. The gear all felt far too large on me, especially the boots. I saw a nearby medical closet with linen, slip-proof socks and hospital gowns. I put on pair after socks until I could walk in the black boots. The gear smelt of burnt flesh and blood, with drops of blackened gore still staining the bulletproof vest and tactical vests. I put on the mask, whispering a few words. The built-in voice distortion system caused them to come out low and predatory, like the hissing of a snake. "Stay with me, man," I whispered, feeling the echoes of past atrocities spreading around me. "Stay with me." I slowly opened the door, looking both ways but seeing no one. Close by, I heard heavy footsteps rushing in our direction. I came around the corner as a dozen guards ran up with rifles. The one in front froze, holding his gun with practiced ease. I stared into the unreadable silver face, wondering if this was the end. "I found 2 boys dead," I said. "Some guards, 2. We heard gunshots," he responded. I nodded, pointing behind me at the pools of blood and the broken bodies laying strewn about like garbage. "It looks like a couple kids attacked some guards," I said. "I was just about to go report it and call for backup." "Go get the principal," he hissed. "We'll secure the area." Gratefully, I crept past the still, eerie figures of the soldiers, unable to believe my luck. I made my way outside, hearing panicked screaming and pained sobs. A new round of kids stood next to the cattle cars of the train under a cloudy, black sky. A thin layer of cracked ice covered the ground. Seeing these kids beaten and pushed forward brought back horrifying memories of my first night here. Looking around, it grew worse when I saw the black SUV of Keller and Vlad. It stood empty, the engine running. In the line of kids, I glimpsed their 2 pale faces dragging 2 girls toward the hallway. Blending in with the crowd of guards, I quickly made my way over to the SUV and got inside. Without hesitation, I put it in drive and slowly started pulling away. No one had noticed anything yet in the chaos of the moment. In the parking lot, I saw dozens of other similar SUVs used by Stonehall for trafficking kids. I hoped I could blend in and get out before anyone raised the alarm. I pulled slowly up to the main gate, my heart twitching like a trapped rabbit. The iron mask of the guard revealed nothing as I rolled down the window. He held his rifle tightly in his hands. Through the eye holes, I saw 2 red irises staring out. Identification, the distorted voice said. Even through the distortion, I could hear the boredom in his voice. I checked the pockets of the dead man's uniform, finding a wallet. I pulled it out, flipping it open and showing the silver badge in the center. The guard nodded, moving back to the guardhouse. The gate slowly started ambling to the side. "Wait."
Stop him!
A voice shrieked from behind me. In utter panic, I glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing Vlad and Keller heading in my direction, sprinting blindly toward the SUV. "Fuck!" I shouted, slamming the gear shift into drive and accelerating rapidly. The tires spun on the ice for a long, heart-stopping moment. The guard ran out of the guardhouse, raising his rifle at the SUV. Then the car took off in a flash as the tires caught, sending me flying through the open gate. I accelerated at dangerous speeds down the slick slope of the Alaskan mountains, leaving Stonehall behind. A few minutes later, a voice came over a radio next to the steering wheel. I recognized the voice of Keller. "Ghostin."
Stop!
This was all a test, and you passed. "You escaped from Stonehall," he said urgently. "You were the only one in the last 5 years to successfully get out. Your training is done. We'd like to offer you a job." I glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing cars far behind me. A few black SUVs flew out of the gate, looking as small as fruit flies. Swearing, I accelerated as fast as I could, fearing I would skid right off the road. After making it to the bottom of the mountain, the road split off into 4 directions. I saw thick forests to the left and right. Nervously, I pulled right and sped around the corner, nearly sliding into a tree. I looked in the rearview mirror again, but I didn't see my pursuers. I pulled over, abandoning the car and fleeing that place of horrors. I walked for days before I found a small town where I managed to blend in, but I still feel hunted to this day. With the rise in consumerism over the years, products have been in an ongoing race to match up to the expectations of the masses. Products are rapidly created to reflect present trends, with previous ones subsequently being dropped out of the disinterest of the makers or simply due to there no longer being a demand. What people don't consider is what goes on behind the scenes of how their parcel magically appears at their front doorstep, removing the need for them to leave the house. I am one such pawn in the ever-adapting chessboard of production and shipment. I am a warehouse operative, and this is my experience of narrowly avoiding being swallowed whole. My job can be briefly summed up as scanning orders, receiving the location of products on the scanner, finding the products and collecting them, putting them in a box, and shipping them off. Not a lot to it, but some technicalities come with the job. I don't know if they are in any way related to my experience, but for the sake of my sanity, I will explain here in the hope that someone can effectively elevate me of my paranoia. In the warehouse, we have 18 aisles. These are labeled from AR, with aisle 1 being A and aisle 18 being R. The middle aisles I leave to you. When we receive the location for each product, the scanner will provide a prompt, such as LA L01 P01. The first L in this prompt stands for the location of which aisle the product is in. The second L stands for the level in which there are 5 per aisle, and P is the position in which there are 23 per aisle. In the case of LAL01 P001, this would mean the product is in aisle A, level 1, position 1, right at the entrance of the aisle, and low enough to where you would have to duck your head a little. The only prompt that appears that is outside of this logic is LXL01 P05. This prompt means the product is on the warehouse floor somewhere, and has likely been dropped down by someone on a high racker, as any level above 2 is unreachable. Now, you are all scholars in warehouse jargon. I will recount the events that followed the order that made me quit my job. The order that still haunts me is Order 2100. It was like any other Friday morning, shaking off the banging headache deserved for the previous night down at the pub. Coffee in hand and a stack of orders already at my station. It's not uncommon not to see anybody at the beginning of the shift. This is for 2 reasons. The first is that people are surprisingly not eager to arrive early to a warehouse job. And second, people tend to begin orders as soon as they come and won't ask for help from anyone unless there is a product out of reach, like I mentioned earlier. I wish I had seen someone this morning, face to face. Maybe if I had, this wouldn't have played with my mind so much. My first two orders were simple. The first was an order for 3 dolls and a pink toy car to go alongside, and the second was for a new state-of-the-art gaming laptop. Our warehouse has a lot of ties with various companies, and so the products which we ship tend to be an amalgamation of genre and type, electronic or not. Then came order 2100. The order was blank. I thought that maybe it was a problem with the ink in the printer, but it couldn't have been since everything else about how our orders looked was the same. The date was in the top left, the shipment time in the bottom right, and the barcode in the top right. No address was attached. I didn't think it was necessary to speak to my boss about it, since I could simply scan the barcode, collect the products, and then press Command T to print the shipment papers, which includes the address on anyway. I had a lot of orders to do today, so my best judgment told me to finish the order and make a note of the products and address on the order receipt so they could be logged by my boss as being completed. I placed the order down, picked up my scanner, and scanned the barcode, the pleasant beep stirring to life from the machine. The order of missing segments on paper was strange, but I assume not completely out of the realm of reason. But what appeared on my scanner was impossible. None of the products were listed. Where the products should be was rather the dark abyss that backgrounded anything that was inputted on the scanner. What there was, however, was the subsequent locations for where these nothingness orders were. The first location was simple enough. Lay L01P01. I walked over to my trolley and placed a large box on top, as I was unsure how many products I would need to get. Lay L01P01, a stack of A4 paper. Simple enough, but it must have been sat there for a while since there was a thick coating of dust. Now this isn't unheard of in a warehouse, but a product this close to the main floor would usually be seen and taken care of within seconds to avoid being marked down by inspectors. Taking initiative, I walked back to my station, grabbed a cloth and cleared the dust. Due to the scanner only telling me the location, I was unsure how many products were needed, and so I only grabbed one. In a field like ours, a mistake in quantity could mean hundreds in lost profit if oversupplied. Location 2, LDL02P06. The squeaking of my trolley as the loose wheel struggled across the floor, doing more harm than good to my headache. I ditched it completely at the entrance to aisle D and walked down to collect the product. We've been having some bad storms lately, so thunder overhead and the ugly whistle created by the numerous cracks in the warehouse's infrastructure were some of the many tortures we had to endure. The storm today was worse than any we had this far. Mystery product number 2 was ironically a handheld fan. I chuckled to myself, admittedly thinking that whoever ordered 2100 would be certainly going somewhere a lot nicer than here. When I reached the entrance of aisle D, however, my trolley was gone. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe someone had mistaken it as theirs, but why hadn't I heard it squeak as it had been pulled away? At that point I didn't think much about this question, likely due to all the noise the storm was making, but this question would be stuck in my mind on repeat as I progressed through the order. I walked back to my station and placed the fan on my desk, certain that I would come across my trolley again at some point. Location 3, LCL01P23. As I entered the aisle of C, I felt the pressure of my headache begin to expand into various regions of my body. With each step I took down the aisle, my stomach delved deeper and deeper into the depths of pain, exploring newfound territory I didn't think capable. My feet dragged behind one another as I placed one in front of the other, and my knees began to buckle slightly. By position 18, I was completely down to my hands and knees, one hand clutching my stomach in a desperate attempt to alleviate the waves of griping pain that came over me. I think the roof has taken a serious beating from the storms, one after the other, as water started to seep through, creating the beginning of what would become a waterfall of downpour from above. As I entered the zone of position 23, my body had given up on me, a face full of rainwater. My limbs arranged like a rag doll someone had finished playing with. All strength had left my body. Anyone, please, please help. I screamed as loud as I could, but I knew even then that no one would come. I was drained, a useless pile of skin and bone tucked into the shadows, unable to even lift my head enough to make sure what I said wouldn't just be a mumbled groan. Someone walked past the entrance to the aisle. I only saw the left side of them, though. I was too far away to distinguish any features I could recognize as any of my co-workers. But the trademark vibrant orange vest was a dead giveaway. I tried again to shout. Hey, please, help, help me. No one came to my rescue. I wouldn't be abandoned. Mustering as much strength as I could, I rolled onto my elbows, blindly grabbing a product from the shelf, and inch by inch, minute by minute, shuffled myself out of the aisle. When I reached the end, I was strong enough to kneel. Hey, what the hell was that about? I was enraged, but the figure was gone. Standing to my feet, I walked along the aisles, taking small steps at a time. Hey, hello, is anyone here? The figure was gone, yes, but so was everyone else. Everything else beforehand I have managed in some way to logically explain, but I still don't have an answer for this. Looking down in my hand at the prize for my resilience, I found a family-sized multi-pack of sweets. Totally not worth it. Defeated and still panting, I returned to my station and placed the sweets on my desk alongside the fan. I decided then and there I would complete the order and then leave for the day, as I was clearly unfit to continue. My quote-unquote friends would certainly be getting an earful the next time I saw them. Location 4, LQL02P15. My headache by this point started to resemble something more like a fever, as I started to have hot flushes periodically that made me break out in a sweat. Yet I was still adamant about completing the order, as to not dampen my reputation as being one to leave a job halfway done. The entrance to aisle Q. I don't know what it was that made me stop there so suddenly, but I felt as if I was being watched. Remaining at the entrance, I turned my head to the right. Nothing but my workstation, which is starting to feel like a sanctuary to me. When I turned my head to the left, however, the figure was back this time, with the back of their head facing me as they walked in the opposite direction. Hell! Squeak. Spinning my head back to the right, my trolley was back within arm's reach. Startled, I spun my head back to the left, only to find the figure gone again, sending a shiver down my spine. I've never had any vendetta towards my colleagues, and was even friendly enough with them to invite them to my wedding a year back. But now they were beginning to become a source of fear that I no longer wished to encounter for as long as this order were to last. Dragging the trolley down the aisle, the fever grew with intensity, beads of sweat trickling down my back and leaving a trail clearly indicating where I'd been. The product was a genuine leather wallet. Ever since I was young, I always wanted a wallet like that, with both my granddad and dad having one just like it. Young me believed that the day I owned a leather wallet was the day I became a man. I don't know why I never bought one, but with the pressure of bills piling up and new priorities stepping into my life like my partner, kid, and job, it forever remained as something to get around to. I picked up the wallet and placed it in the box on the trolley. Beep! The scanner had refreshed again, saying LQL02P15. Shrugging to myself, I picked up another wallet and placed it in the box. Beep! It happened again. This ritual of the scanner refreshing each time I placed a wallet in the box happened over 20 times until there were no longer any more wallets. Beep! Exhausted and drenched in sweat, I looked down at my scanner again as it read LQL03P15. Sighing, I pulled my trolley just below, raised the trolley slightly, and climbed on top as it shuddered beneath my weight and rolled slightly. Clinging onto level 3 to stabilize the trolley beneath me, I peered in. The pallet the products usually sit on was empty, save for a single wallet all the way at the back. Pressing my chest against the rim of level 3, I reached my arm in as far as it would go, straining against the resistance and my body's groans of disapproval. My fingertips barely grazed the side of it as I made a final push, jumping a little to grab it, the trolley beneath me giving way. Yelling in surprise, I was soon comforted by solid concrete as I thudded to the floor. My body ached, sending a sensation like being electrocuted all throughout my muscles. I sat up slightly on my hands, dazed, before propping myself back up onto my feet and placing the wallet in the box. Location 5, Le Lazare Pétrez. I started to feel a little better at this point regarding my headache, despite the newly appointed pain from the fall. Pulling the trolley along, I entered aisle E. It was hard to see in the dimmed lights, but it was evidently clear that aisle E had not been cleaned properly Thursday night, as my shoes would stick to the floor with a noticeable tug as it broke free each step I took. The trolley became harder to drag as its wheels started to become trapped in whatever was on the floor, but the product was only a couple steps away. So I pulled increasingly harder with each step I took, becoming admittedly more and more frustrated until I abandoned it completely, kicking the wheel and cursing under my breath as I left it. When I reached the product, it was a self-help book on anger management. Order 2100 was certainly our little comedian. Placing it in the box, I picked the box up and turned my back on the trolley, too tired to even free it from the aisle. Location 6, La Leona Persata. I chuckled to myself when I saw this. After 3 products in a row that truly tested my patience, the fact this one was not far at all from my station was a welcome change. Leaving the box where it was, I walked down aisle A to position 7 and looked at the half-open box that lay there. Clearly, someone had already been here before me, but this could have been weeks ago, given that some products take longer to sell. Inside was a single smartphone. The package was demolished, revealing a screen that was smashed in several places. What I don't recall presently was hearing anything when I was in aisle A at the time, not even my own breathing. Even the storm, which could be heard throughout the order thus far, had grown completely silent. I didn't feel right giving this customer a broken phone and instead pressed enter on the scanner to see if there were any other locations with the same product.
There was...
Le L02 7. Looking up at level 2, I carefully searched through the boxes for a phone that was as close to pristine as possible, opting for one that had a tiny scuff on the bottom right corner of the package. Looking down, the scanner began to flash LA L01 P07. I had never seen the scanner do this before, and it was clearly adamant that the broken phone was the correct one, so I surrendered to its command and walked back to my station, placing it inside the box. Location 7, LHL02 P13. I recall hearing the storm again around this time. As I walked down past the aisles on my way to aisle H, I couldn't help but wonder how many more products were left. I was tired, drained in fact, in pain, and utterly defeated by the demands of Order 2100. As I passed aisle C, however, I swear with every ounce of my being that I saw someone there. This time they were looking at me. Realization overcoming me, I swiveled back around on my heel towards aisle C. Again, no one was there. This had happened too many times to be imaginary. It couldn't be. It shouldn't be. But if it wasn't, where did they go? Turning back towards aisle H, I saw the right side of a figure walk down it. Picking up the pace, I rounded the corner to H. The entire aisle, from bottom to top, and from the entrance to the end, was completely soaked in blood. The stench overpowering my senses, I fought back a flurry of heaving gags. Slipping in the pool of blood, I broke into a sprint towards the warehouse exit. This was the last straw. Someone or something was here, and it made sense to me that it was the reason for where all my colleagues had gone. Skidding as I rounded the corner, I tripped, rolling 3 times on the floor, stopping at the box for Order 2100 as I heard something moving across the floor. Beep! Looking down at the scanner, it read LX L01 P05. The product was on the warehouse floor. Looking in the direction of where I heard the rolling was my coffee mug. The mug my son gave me. The mug that read World's Best Dad. There was nothing else on the warehouse floor to my knowledge. Is this what you want? You want me to finish your damn order? Oh, I'll finish it here and now. Picking up the mug, fury clouded my thoughts as I slammed it into the box, ceramic chunks flying out. There. Are you happy now?
Beep.
The scanner read, LF LO6 below 6. There is no level 6, unless it meant the roof. Suddenly, loud banging was heard from overhead, the scanner beeping in quick succession to match each bang that echoed throughout the building. Le, LD, LC, LB, Lay, LX LO1 PO5. My throat began to tighten, my body shaking, tears running down my face as I turned behind me. The figure was directly in front of me, and this time it was facing me. Its skin was covered in a dirt-laden hexagonal pattern, almost like scales, which were only noticeable from being so up close. Eyes like two sunken pits of dark void, engulfed by deep strokes of amber, that seemed to stare right to my very being and more. But besides all this, it looked normal. It looked like a man. Early 50s, receding dark hair that was beginning to go grey, and thin, pale lips that remained a permanent straight line while all still wearing the same orange vest. There was no malice in his complexion, but this scared me more than any sign of anger could. I remained frozen, staring at this figure, my mouth agape and quivering, my lips beginning to feel dry, and my heartbeat so fast I could feel it pulsing in my head. I gulped and spoke. What are you?" He, or rather it, didn't respond. It just remained standing, staring right at me inches away. I looked down at my scanner, which still displayed LXL01 PO5. There was no point trying to reason with it as I turned on my heels and made for the exit. It was fast, unexplainably fast, as it appeared, just as suddenly as it had before in front of me. I broke down into tears again. Please, I don't know. I don't know what you want." My words echoing throughout the warehouse, making me endure how pathetic I sounded. I knelt in front of it. There was no point trying to run, and even I knew that. It reached its arm out towards me ever so slowly. It knew it had me. It knew there was nothing I could do, and it was taking its time. Beep! The scanner read, "Lost connection to the network." Trying to reconnect. When I looked back up from the scanner, the figure was gone. I walked back over to my station. I couldn't bear to look in the box again. I placed my scanner down and walked out of the door and into the tempest. When I reached my car, I sat there a moment trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. The rain was coming down so hard at this point that it was nearly impossible to see out of the car window without the wipers going, but something out of the mist came towards me. I couldn't see what or who it was, but as soon as I saw that orange vest, I turned the key in the ignition and drove like a bat out of hell out of the parking lot. Given that it was still before 5 p.m, the roads were empty, and my wife and son were still at work and school by the time I arrived home. My boss called me countless times asking, "Where did you go?" Please come back, and the all-too-sweet admiration that I was the employee that the company had envisioned for the role. I told him each time that I had quit and would not return. As I'm writing this, I received a further 2 calls from my boss asking how I was. I still haven't seen my family, and it's getting late. They haven't responded to any of my calls. I don't know if they've gone to my mother-in-law's or what.
I don't know what's going on, but if anyone is reading this,
Please use what I have said here as some level of advice. I pray you end up in a better fate than me, but I pray even more for my sanity and for my family who may be affected. I'm a mess. I feel as if that thing is still here, still following me. Even now, my orange vest hanging at the end of the dark corridor behind me is sending shivers down my spine. I don't remember putting it there, but I don't remember much of what I did after getting home after what happened today. As soon as I post this, I'm going to get rid of it. I don't even know where to begin, but I do know that this isn't in my head, and it's getting worse. It all started about 2 weeks ago as I was heading into my work, a large corporate building in the city centre. I can't drive, so the bus commute takes me about 30 minutes from my home. Nothing was out of the ordinary that day. and I got off at the usual stop across the street from my work. Between the bus stop and the door was a small area with benches and trees throwing dappled shadows across the cobblestone. I started walking towards the building when something caught my eye. It was a shadow. The shadow fell down over an empty bench from the tree above, except it didn't fall right. The shadow appeared to mold itself around an unseen shape, hugging tightly around something. It was so strange that I stopped dead in my tracks, squinting my eyes trying to understand what it was I was looking at. That's when, for just a split second, I could make out the contours of a face. Shadows pouring into where eye sockets would be and curving around a head. I shook my head out of instinct and pushed down the uneasy feeling inside my gut. I started speed walking towards the safety of the door. I knew that there wasn't anything wrong, and I probably just saw a strange trick of the light. But knowing that fact didn't stop my hammering heart. As I passed the bench, I couldn't stop my eyes from flicking to the side. It wasn't there anymore. I sighed in relief and continued on my way. Finally reaching the door to my building, I pulled it open and moved inside. I wish I hadn't looked back then. Maybe that third look was what sealed my fate. I looked over at the bench through the glass door as I closed it behind me. The thing was there, barely visible as the dappled shadows of leaves moved over it. Then it moved. The shadows on the face shifted as the head turned and faced me. I could feel it looking at me through the glass door. I quickly turned and made my way to my desk. It took me a few minutes to calm down and rationalize the situation to myself, so thoroughly that I assumed I was sleep-deprived and didn't see anything weird. So the rest of the day went by as normal. Everyday boring office tasks and meetings kept my mind occupied. By the time the workday was over, I had completely forgotten my encounter. As I headed out the doorway, I pulled up my collar against the icy wind that had picked up after the sun went down. I checked my watch and knew the bus would stop at any moment, and I needed to hustle across the street to make it. I started lightly jogging towards the stop when I saw movement. My first assumption was that a small bird may have just flown out of one of the tree branches. As my head turned towards the motion, my blood went ice cold. It was the bench from this morning, and it was still empty. I didn't see the shape, but somehow I knew it was there. I snapped my head to the front and sprinted towards the stop with extra vigor. I finally reached the small bus stop, and slightly out of breath, I chastised myself for being such a scaredy cat. As a woman who commutes alone at night, there was plenty of real dangers to be scared of, and here I was afraid of a shadow. As I was thinking about how silly I was being, the bus came around the corner and stopped in front of me. I stepped inside and paid my fare before moving into the nearest empty seat. The window next to my seat faced towards the office building and benches. As stupid as I was convincing myself this whole scenario was, I also couldn't find the courage to look back. I was scared to confirm my own suspicions. As the bus started crawling away from its spot, I hazarded a quick glance towards the bench. I didn't see anything there and sighed in relief. A relief that poured out of my body the second I turned my head back and saw it again. The bus's lights were throwing reflections and shadows across the bus stop, and they weren't falling right. The invisible shape of a man stood next to the stop, its body facing towards me, until there was no more light and shadow to illuminate it anymore. I sank back down into my seat and tried to focus on not crying. That was the first time I saw it, but unfortunately not the last. And so an awful routine fell into place. Each morning I would get off the bus and see the shadow sitting on its bench. I would even catch it turning its head to face the bus a few times. I would rush past where it was go to work, and each night it would wait for me at the bus stop. One morning, it was even seated on the bench next to a woman on her phone. She didn't seem to notice it at all, even though to me its silhouette and shape were painfully obvious. I asked one of my more friendly co-workers, John, to join me for lunch outside about 3 days ago. I wanted to see if someone else would independently see it. We both walked out the glass door, and I could immediately see the shape, waiting for me at its bench. I swallowed down all my panic, and as casually as possible pointed out the bench to John, who without any hesitation walked towards it and sat down right next to it. I stood in front of him as he sat and flicked my eyes over to the shape every few seconds. This was the first time I saw it up close. The shadow from the trees fell over its form and molded around it. It seemed to have a masculine shape, and it was bigger than I had first assumed. At one point, John took a bite of his sandwich and gestured towards the seat next to him. "Want to sit down?" he asked me, and I glanced towards the bench. The shape then moved faster than it had before. Its head, which until now had been facing John, shot up and faced me as much as something without a face can. The intensity and purposeful nature of this made me feel ill immediately. I felt as if it was staring at me, waiting for me to sit where it was, to get closer to it. I instinctively took a step away from the bench and made a lame excuse to John that I needed to go back inside. He seemed a little confused, but stood up and we went back inside together. I spent the rest of the day worrying that I might be losing my mind. Surely if an invisible man was hanging around outside for weeks, I wouldn't be the only one that noticed. That night I left the office later than usual to catch up on some work. I left the office just 5 minutes before the last bus of the night would come around. I looked down at the bus stop, and confusion and dread filled my heart when I saw no shape waiting there. I glanced over at the bench and saw nothing there as well. I should have been glad that the thing wasn't there, but I couldn't escape the fear that came from no longer knowing where it would be. I didn't have time to worry about it either way, as the bus came to a halt at the stop. I sprinted across the area and pushed myself through the door of the bus into its safety. The door closed behind me as I looked out at the seats looking for an open one. And there it was, barely visible in the dim light streaming through the windows outside. It was seated by itself on a bench, its head facing me. I almost screamed when I saw it and took steps backwards, almost falling over a woman's baggage. I felt the eyes of the other passengers on me as I panicked internally. This thing was inside the bus with me. I swallowed fear as I scrambled to the seat furthest away from it and fell down next to an elderly man. I sank down low in the seat, trying to hide myself from its gaze. The old man seemed to notice this and leaned over. "Miss, are you all right?" he asked quietly. Probably didn't want to embarrass me in a full bus. I felt a rogue tear stream down my face. I took a chance and whispered back to him as quietly as possible. "Can you see someone sitting 3 rows back on the left?" My voice was barely audible. A part of me was terrified that thing may hear me. The old man furrowed his bushy white brows and slowly raised his head up to peek over the back of the seat in the direction I had given. He squinted and tilted his head slightly after a second. There was confusion in his eyes. He turned back around and looked me over again. "I don't see anything," he said quickly and turned away from me. His entire posture and demeanor had immediately shifted into distrust. He probably assumed I was a crazy person and didn't want to be involved, but that moment where I saw confusion in his eyes stuck with me. It was a look of disbelief you would have if you saw something impossible. I sank even lower in my seat, my face red with embarrassment. The old man almost purposefully didn't look my way again and turned his body away as well. At the next stop, the man quickly stood up and moved towards the front, leaving me alone on the bench. As the door opened and he was about to step off, he made eye contact with me again before his eyes snapped behind me. His eyes looked fearful as he quickly hopped off the bus. I Saturday frouncing in my seat as the bus started driving again, leaving the man alone in the street, staring through the bus windows at me. I Saturday low in my seat the rest of the way home, afraid to move, and knowing that if I got off the bus, there wouldn't be another bus until the next morning. I tried to distract myself as best I could, but it still felt like the longest 30 minutes of my life. As the bus started approaching my block, my stomach continued to sink deeper into my shoes. I was terrified that it would know where I lived now, but I had literally no choice. So I decided to make a risky play by waiting till the last second to get off the bus. Hopefully that thing wouldn't be quick enough to follow me. The fact that this thing could probably move through walls was a thought I entertained for only a moment, because if that were the case, I wouldn't be able to stop it anyway. As the bus stopped on my block, I stayed seated, watching the doors open. My entire body felt wired as I waited for my chance. As I timed it out in my head, the last moment finally came, and the driver shifted in his seat to reach for the door close. I jumped up and damn near sprinted off the bus. I fell out of the doors and took multiple steps away from them, I was breathing harshly and my hands clutched my bag so tightly my fingers were white. I turned as I heard the doors close behind me. I stood and stared at the door of the bus. Behind the glass on the other side of the door, it stood staring down at me. It was right on my heels. It must have barely missed the opening in the door. Then the shadows shifted as it moved in a way I couldn't decipher at first, getting closer to the window of the door. I stared back horrified as the head pressed up right against the glass. White wisps of condensation of hot breath on cold glass appeared over its mouth. The bus had started moving at this point, but I stood rooted in place, unable to process what I was even seeing. I watched as it moved rapidly from the door, though the bus trying to remain in my view through the windows until it came to a standstill in the back of the bus, staring at me through the window. As the bus disappeared from view, I became aware again and held back sobs as I sprinted, the entire way home not taking a moment to stop until I was behind my locked apartment door. I crumpled into a shaking ball of tears when I was finally home. I didn't know who to tell or what to do. I know I am not crazy and I don't take any drugs. I closed every single curtain in my house and double-checked everything that could lock. I was convinced that whatever that thing was, it wouldn't stop at just following me on the bus. I was unfortunately completely right. That brings us to yesterday, where it was mercifully a Saturday, which meant no buses. I tried to calm my shot nerves best I could at home, but eventually decided going to see my parents would be the best help. They lived a walkable distance away from me, and so I committed to going over and possibly staying the night. I packed some extra clothes in a bag and grabbed my things. I locked my apartment and made my way down the stairs and out the front door. A scream escaped my lips before I could even stop myself. It was standing in the doorway to my apartment building. I had nearly walked right through it. I stumbled backwards and slammed the door closed, crying as I moved away from the doorway. A neighbor who had been collecting mail came over to help, but I couldn't explain. What could I say? I just sprinted back up to my apartment as fast as I could and locked it behind me. I picked up my phone and called my father. I was so frazzled, I'm sure I didn't make any sense trying to explain to him on the phone what was wrong. He said he'd be right over, and I hung up the phone and locked myself in my bathroom with a kitchen knife. Sometime later my bell rang, and I forced myself out of the locked bathroom to open the door for my father. His face looked deeply concerned as I opened the door, and he got a look at me. I was so relieved that I hugged him close and cried. He hugged me back and gently moved me into the apartment and closed the door behind him. I sat down on the couch and he took a seat across from me. "What's wrong? Did something happen at work?" he asked softly, clearly concerned but also confused. In that moment I contemplated my options. Could I even tell him the truth without looking like I was losing my mind? I bit my lip and weighed my options, eventually settling on a half-truth. "I think someone has been following me home from the office. I haven't been able to get a good look at him, but I feel like I am going crazy." I admitted. I didn't want to lie, but I wasn't going to mention the detail that the stalker is invisible to anyone until I absolutely have to. My father immediately had plenty of questions that I didn't have answers to. We settled on the fact that involving the police at this stage wouldn't really work, as I had no witnesses, evidence, or even a description. Instead, my father agreed to stay the night at my home and then go with me to purchase some self-defense tools the next day. I did feel a lot safer having him around, and it started to ease some of the stress I had been building up the past 2 weeks. I made us some pasta for dinner and made a temporary bed on the couch for my father. We ended up watching old movies on the couch together until we both fell asleep. I startled awake around 2 a.m. to the sound of a gunfight roaring from the TV that was still on. I looked over at my father, snoring contently on the couch, and pulled a blanket up around him. I muted the TV and walked into the kitchen to get some water before I went back to my room. I stood in front of the fridge and filled my glass with water. In my apartment, most of it is open concept, so I could see the front door from where I stood in the kitchen. My eyes fell on the front door and lingered there, unsure why something seemed off with it. Then I spotted it, the small gap underneath the door that let a thin sliver of light into my dark apartment. It had 2 gaps where the light was being blocked. Legs. Someone was standing in front of my door, blocking the light. I started shaking and moved as quietly as possible to the couch where my dad was still asleep. I never took my eyes off the door as I nudged my father to wake him. He opened one eye lazily and saw me crouching next to him and opened the other. Any sign of sleep my father had before he noticed my expression vanished as he turned quickly, eyes wide, and faced me. I placed a shushing finger over my mouth and then pointed towards my front door. My father looked towards the door, and I saw him looking for the problem before his eyes glanced down at the gap. I could see the goosebumps raise on his arms as he quietly maneuvered his way off the couch towards my kitchen. He reached inside my knife block for a weapon and crawled towards the doorway. I sat still and stiff on my hands and knees next to the couch, watching him approach. He took a last glance at me before moving towards my peephole. He placed his face against it and peeked outside. I could see the tension in his body release slightly and be replaced with hesitation as he pulled his head away from the peephole and looked down at the gap where the shadow of legs still stood. Before I could even stop him, he reached up and quickly as he could unlocked the door and swung it open. A noise of protest caught in my throat and died away there as the hallway stood empty and illuminated behind my door. My father peeked out and looked down both ends of the hallway before closing and locking the door behind him. He turned to face me and his expression was hard to read. "Must have been a trick of the light," he said in a hushed tone as he came over to me and helped me to my feet. I stood there silently staring at the door, waiting for the shadows to return, but they didn't. I ended up sitting in the chair in the living room watching the door as my dad eventually fell asleep again. The shadows didn't return again, and eventually the sunlight beaming through my windows eased my fear enough for me sleep a bit. When my dad woke me this morning, I felt like crap. We had some coffee discussing my options if I did have Stalker. My father promised to go out shopping for me today to get me a Ring camera and some new, stronger door locks. I thanked him for dealing with me and he left. I went about my usual Sunday routine as best I could, and things felt like they were dying down as the late afternoon rolled around and the sun rays started pouring into my apartment. I decided I needed some advice and sat down in the living room to write up this post. While I've been writing though, I've been feeling worse and worse. I looked up a few minutes ago and saw a beam of light hit and bend around something as it quickly moved into my bathroom. I think it's in my house now. I don't know what to do. My dad should be back soon, but I am too terrified to move. I can see it watching me through the gap of my bathroom door. Its body is moving in a strange way now. It looks like it's panting or shaking with excitement. The dark shadows of my bathroom fold around its body, and it looks bigger than before. Much bigger, as if its body expanded to fill the space of the room it's in. I can't move. I don't know what to do. Plessy, someone help. Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If you dare to explore further, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling tales of horror and the supernatural. Remember, the shadows hold endless mysteries, waiting to be unveiled. Stay tuned for more bone-chilling stories as we continue to traverse the eerie depths of the unknown together. Until next time, may your dreams be free from the haunting echoes of our tales. Or perhaps not.